Picture Canada's economic powerhouse, home to 15 million people in the nation's capital region. Yet thousands are fleeing Ontario every month for cheaper provinces. What's driving this mass exodus from Canada's most populated province? The reasons might shock you more than the brutal housing costs. Housing crisis that's breaking families. When you're paying over $1 million for what used to be a starter home, you know something's gone terribly wrong. Ontario's housing market has become a financial battleground where average families simply can't compete anymore. Let's put this in perspective. The average home price across Ontario hit $950,000 in 2024. That's a staggering 300% increase since 2000, when that same house would have cost you around $240,000. To put it another way, if housing prices had grown at the same rate as inflation, that home should cost about $360,000 today. Instead, it's nearly triple that amount. But here's where it gets even more brutal. In the Greater Toronto Area, the median home price now exceeds $1.3 million. That means half of all homes sold cost more than that. We're talking about basic three-bedroom houses in suburban neighborhoods, not luxury mansions. A typical family earning Ontario's median household income of around $84,000 would need to save every single penny for over 15 years just to afford a down payment. And if you think renting is the escape route, think again. Rental costs are now consuming 50 to 60% of median household income across the province. Financial experts recommend spending no more than 30% of your income on housing. In Ontario, you'd need to earn over $140,000 annually just to rent affordably in most urban areas. The human cost is devastating. Young professionals with engineering degrees, teachers, nurses, and skilled tradespeople are abandoning Ontario in droves. They're heading to Alberta, where a comparable home costs $450,000, or to Nova Scotia, where you can still buy a decent house for under $300,000. According to Statistics Canada, Ontario experienced a net loss of 61,000 residents to other provinces in 2023 alone. Take Sarah, a 29-year-old accountant from Mississauga. Despite earning $75,000 annually, she realized she'd never afford a home in Ontario. Last year, she moved to Calgary, bought a three-bedroom house for $420,000, and cut her commute in half. Stories like hers are becoming the norm, not the exception. But high housing costs are just the beginning of Ontario's financial burden on residents, crushing tax burden and cost of living. Even if you manage to find affordable housing, Ontario's government will take a massive bite out of every dollar you earn. The province has quietly become one of the most expensive places to live in North America, and it's not just the housing driving people away. Here's a number that'll make your wallet weep. Combined federal and provincial tax rates in Ontario now reach 53.5% for middle-class earners making over $95,000. That means if you're a skilled professional earning $100,000, you're handing over more than half your income to various levels of government. Compare that to Texas, where there's no state income tax, or even Alberta, where you'd keep an extra $8,000 annually on the same salary. But the tax grab doesn't stop at your paycheck. Ontario's harmonized sales tax sits at 13%, making it among the highest sales taxes in North America. Every car purchase, restaurant meal, and household appliance gets hit with this premium. When you're already stretched thin by housing costs, that extra tax on everything you buy adds up fast. Then there's your electricity bill, which has become a monthly shock therapy session. Hydro rates have increased over 300% since 2003, giving Ontario the highest electricity costs in North America. The average household now pays around $150 monthly for electricity, compared to $65 in Quebec. That's over $1,000 extra per year just to keep your lights on. Auto insurance adds insult to injury. Ontario drivers pay an average of $2,000 annually for car insurance, nearly double what drivers pay in other provinces. In Quebec, the same coverage costs around $700. In Alberta, it's about $1,200. Why the massive difference? Ontario's complex legal system and fraud rates drive premiums through the roof. Let's do some quick math. A middle-class Ontario family earning $100,000 faces roughly $53,000 in income taxes, $150 monthly in electricity costs, and $2,000 yearly for car insurance. Before they've bought a single grocery item, they're down to about $45,000 in disposable income. That same family in Alberta would have around $58,000 left over. The result? Even well-paid professionals are finding their standard of living declining year after year. Engineers, doctors, and business owners who should be thriving are instead watching their purchasing power erode under the weight of Ontario's tax burden. These financial pressures are compounded by a healthcare system that's failing to deliver basic services. Healthcare system in crisis mode. What good are high taxes if you can't even see a doctor when you're sick? Ontario's healthcare system, once the pride of Canadian Medicare, has become a cruel joke that's putting lives at risk and driving families to desperate measures. Picture this nightmare scenario. You wake up with chest pain at 2 a.m. and rush to the nearest emergency room. Instead of immediate care, you're told the wait time is 24 hours. That's not an exaggeration. Emergency room wait times in major Ontario cities now average over 20 hours, with some Toronto area hospitals hitting 30-hour delays during peak periods. The numbers behind this crisis are staggering. As of 2024, 2.3 million Ontarians don't have a family doctor. That's roughly 1 in 6 residents left scrambling for basic medical care. When you can't get a family physician, where do you go for routine checkups, prescription renewals, or when your kid has a fever? The emergency room, which is already overwhelmed. Here's why the system is crumbling. Ontario faces a crushing nurse shortage of 22,000 positions across the province. Nurses are fleeing to the United States, where they can earn $80,000 to $100,000 annually, compared to Ontario's average nursing salary of around $65,000. Meanwhile, medical procedures are delayed by 12 to 18 months due to massive backlogs. Need a hip replacement? You might be waiting until 2026. Cardiac surgery? Hope it's not urgent. The human cost is devastating. Linda Morrison, a 67-year-old from Hamilton, waited 14 months for cataract surgery while her vision deteriorated. She couldn't drive, couldn't read, and became increasingly isolated. Stories like hers are multiplying across the province as the healthcare system fails its most vulnerable citizens. Young families are particularly affected. When your toddler needs medical attention and you're facing a 20-hour emergency room wait, many parents are choosing to drive to upstate New York or Michigan for care. They're paying out of pocket for basic services that should be covered by the system they fund through their taxes. The healthcare collapse isn't happening in isolation. The healthcare crisis reflects broader infrastructure problems plaguing the province, crumbling infrastructure and transportation nightmare. The healthcare collapse is just one symptom of a much larger disease. Ontario's infrastructure is literally falling apart beneath your feet, turning basic activities like commuting to work or keeping the lights on into daily exercises and frustration. Let's start with the transportation nightmare that defines modern Ontario life. Highway 401, which cuts through the heart of the Greater Toronto Area, has earned the dubious honor of being ranked among the world's worst traffic congestion corridors. You're not just competing with cars from Toronto anymore. You're sitting in the same traffic jams that rival Los Angeles, Mumbai, and São Paulo. Here's what that means for your daily life. The average commuter in the Toronto area now spends 96 minutes per day stuck in traffic, according to 2024 data from TomTom Traffic Index. That's nearly 2 hours of your life wasted every single day, or roughly 400 hours per year. To put that in perspective, you're spending the equivalent of 10 full work weeks annually just sitting in your car going nowhere. Public transit isn't the salvation you'd hope for either. Ontario's transit systems are facing a maintenance backlog exceeding $50 billion. The Toronto Transit Commission alone needs $33 billion just to bring its aging subway system up to a state of good repair. Meanwhile, GO Transit faces constant delays and overcrowding, with some routes operating at 150% capacity during rush hours. The electrical grid tells a similar story of neglect and decay. Ontario's aging power infrastructure causes frequent outages that leave entire communities in the dark. In 2023, the province experienced over 1,200 significant power interruptions, affecting millions of residents. Summer heat waves regularly strain the system beyond capacity, leading to rolling blackouts in urban areas. Municipal infrastructure across Ontario is in even worse shape. A 2024 report by the Association of Municipalities of Ontario found that 60% of communities rate their infrastructure as poor or very poor. We're talking about crumbling roads, failing water systems, and bridges that haven't seen a major repairs since the 1970s. Consider the real-world impact. Mark Thompson, a software developer from Oakville, calculated that his daily commute costs him $4,200 annually in lost productivity time, plus gas and vehicle wear. He recently accepted a remote position with a Vancouver company rather than continue the daily grind of Ontario's broken transportation system. These systemic problems are driving away the province's most valuable resource, young talent. Brain drain, young professionals fleeing Ontario. When your brightest minds are packing their bags and heading for the exits, you know your province is in serious trouble. Ontario's young professionals aren't just complaining about high costs and poor infrastructure anymore. They're voting with their feet, and the results are devastating for the province's future. The statistics paint a grim picture of Ontario's brain drain crisis. According to Statistics Canada data from 2024, 40% of recent university graduates are leaving Ontario within 5 years of finishing their degrees. These aren't dropouts or underachievers. We're talking about engineers, computer scientists, doctors, and business graduates who represent the future of Ontario's economy. Where are they going? Tech workers are flocking to Alberta, British Columbia, and especially the United States, where salaries can be 20 to 30% higher than comparable positions in Ontario. A software engineer starting out in Toronto might earn $75,000 annually, while the same role in Seattle pays $95,000 US dollars, which translates to about 130,000 Canadian dollars. When you factor in lower taxes and cheaper housing in many U.S. markets, the financial advantage becomes overwhelming. Take Jessica Chen, a computer science graduate from the University of Waterloo. After 2 years struggling to afford a one-bedroom apartment in Toronto on her $70,000 salary, she accepted a position with Microsoft in Redmond, Washington. Her new salary is $120,000 US dollars. Her rent is lower, and she actually has money left over to save for a house. Stories like hers are becoming the norm in Ontario's tech sector. The healthcare brain drain is equally alarming. Ontario medical schools are training doctors who immediately head south after residency. Why wouldn't they? A family physician in Ontario earns around $250,000 annually, while the same doctor in Texas can make $350,000 to $400,000 with better working conditions and lower overhead costs. This exodus has real consequences for Ontario's demographics. The province now has the lowest population growth rate among major Canadian provinces, with more people leaving for other provinces than arriving. In 2023, Ontario lost a net 61,000 residents to interprovincial migration, the largest outflow in decades. The ripple effects are already visible. Universities report declining enrollment from Ontario residents, while employers struggle to fill skilled positions. Innovation districts that once thrived are seeing companies relocate or scale back operations due to talent shortages. The exodus of young talent is accelerating Ontario's transformation into an unaffordable retirement destination. Economic stagnation and declining competitiveness. As young talent flees and costs spiral upward, Ontario's once mighty economy is withering on the vine. The province that built Canada's industrial backbone is now watching helplessly as businesses pack up and move to friendlier jurisdictions where they can actually turn a profit. The manufacturing sector tells the most devastating story. Since 2000, Ontario has lost 35% of its manufacturing jobs, with over 300,000 positions eliminated. These weren't just any jobs. They were well-paying middle-class careers that supported entire communities across southwestern Ontario. Cities like Windsor, London, and Hamilton built their identities around these industries, only to watch factories close one by one. Why are businesses leaving? The math is brutal. Ontario's corporate tax burden runs about 40% higher than competing U.S. states. A manufacturer in Ontario faces combined federal and provincial corporate taxes of around 26.5%, while the same company in Michigan pays roughly 19%. When you're operating on thin margins, that 7.5% difference can mean the difference between profit and loss. Energy costs are the final nail in the coffin. Remember those electricity rates that have tripled since 2003? They're not just hurting families. They're driving major employers out of the province. Aluminum smelters, steel mills, and other energy-intensive industries have relocated to Quebec, where hydro rates are a fraction of Ontario's costs. Even data centers, which could provide high-tech jobs, are choosing other provinces due to Ontario's punishing electricity prices. The result? Business investment per capita in Ontario is now the lowest among G7 regions. Companies simply aren't betting on Ontario's future anymore. Foreign direct investment has plummeted, while domestic businesses are expanding operations elsewhere. Take Magna International, one of Canada's largest auto parts manufacturers. Despite being headquartered in Aurora, Ontario, the company now does most of its expansion in the southern United States and Mexico, where costs are lower and regulations more streamlined. When your own homegrown success stories are investing elsewhere, you know you have a competitiveness problem. The ripple effects extend far beyond large corporations. Small businesses struggle with regulatory compliance costs that can consume 10 to 15% of their annual revenue. Professional service firms are moving back-office operations to Alberta or the Maritimes, where office space and labor costs are significantly lower. Economic decline is particularly devastating Ontario's smaller communities and rural areas. Rural Ontario's slow death. While Ontario's cities struggle with unaffordable housing and traffic nightmares, rural communities face an even grimmer reality. They're slowly disappearing altogether. Drive through small-town Ontario today, and you'll see the heartbreaking evidence of a rural apocalypse that's been unfolding for over a decade. Since 2010, more than 200 rural Ontario communities have lost essential services that once defined small-town life. We're talking about post offices, banks, gas stations, and grocery stores shutting down permanently. When the local Tim Hortons closes, you know a town is in serious trouble. Healthcare access has become a cruel joke in rural Ontario. Hospital closures have forced residents to travel hours for emergency care that used to be minutes away. The emergency room in Smooth Rock Falls closed permanently in 2019, leaving residents facing a 2-hour drive to Timmins for urgent medical care. Imagine having a heart attack and knowing the nearest hospital is 120 kilometers away on winter roads. Schools are vanishing too. Rural school consolidations have left some areas without local education options, forcing families to bus their children up to 90 minutes each way to attend classes. The ripple effect is devastating. When schools close, young families leave, and communities lose their future. The numbers tell the story of rural Ontario's demographic collapse. The median age in rural Ontario now exceeds 45 years, compared to 40 in urban areas. Some counties have median ages over 50, meaning half the population is approaching retirement or already retired. Who's going to run the farms, maintain the infrastructure, and keep these communities alive when the current generation can no longer work? Take Kapuskasing, once a thriving forestry town of 8,000 people. Today, it's down to about 5,500 residents, with an aging population and limited economic opportunities. The local paper mill that employed hundreds closed in 2020, taking with it the town's economic foundation. Young people graduate high school and immediately leave for Toronto or Ottawa, never to return. The economic impact spreads beyond individual towns. Rural Ontario produces much of the province's food, manages its forests, and maintains crucial infrastructure. As these communities shrink, agricultural productivity declines, and resource management becomes more difficult and expensive. Climate challenges are adding another layer of difficulty to life in Ontario. Extreme weather and climate pressures. Natural disasters and extreme weather events are making life in Ontario increasingly unpredictable and expensive. What used to be rare occurrences have become annual expectations that strain both household budgets and government resources. Ontario has experienced a dramatic surge in climate-related emergencies over the past decade. Ice storms now hit the province with devastating regularity, causing widespread power outages that can last for weeks. The 2013 ice storm left over 300,000 Toronto area residents without power for up to 2 weeks during Christmas, while the 2023 storm knocked out electricity for nearly 500,000 people across southern Ontario. Summer brings its own set of nightmares. Heat domes are becoming increasingly common, with temperatures reaching dangerous levels in major cities. Toronto recorded its hottest day ever in July 2024, hitting 42 degrees Celsius with humidity making it feel like 50. The city's aging infrastructure simply isn't designed for these extremes, leading to widespread air conditioning failures and health emergencies. Flooding events have increased by 400% over the past decade, according to Insurance Bureau of Canada data. What used to be 100-year floods now seem to happen every few years. The 2024 flooding in Ottawa and eastern Ontario caused over $200 million in damage, while similar events hit Windsor, London, and parts of the Greater Toronto Area with increasing frequency. These climate disasters aren't just inconveniences. They're financial catastrophes for ordinary families. Home insurance claims related to severe weather have tripled since 2015, driving up premiums for everyone. The average Ontario homeowner now pays an extra $800 annually in insurance costs compared to a decade ago, largely due to climate-related risks. Power grid failures during extreme weather events cost the provincial economy an estimated $1 billion annually in lost productivity and damaged equipment. Businesses struggle to maintain operations when they can't rely on consistent electricity, while families face spoiled food, frozen pipes, and emergency heating costs. Consider the Johnsons from Mississauga, who've dealt with 3 major power outages in the past 2 years. Each outage cost them roughly $1,500 in spoiled groceries, hotel stays, and emergency repairs. They're now considering moving to a province with more reliable infrastructure and fewer climate emergencies. These mounting challenges are creating a perfect storm that's reshaping Ontario's political landscape. Political gridlock and policy failures. While climate disasters pile on top of existing problems, Ontario's political leaders seem incapable of addressing any of the crises they've helped create. After decades of promises and policy announcements, the province's fundamental problems have only gotten worse, leaving voters frustrated and systems in collapse. Take housing policy, where successive governments have announced dozens of initiatives that sound impressive but deliver nothing. The current government promised to build 1.5 million homes by 2031, yet housing starts actually declined in 2023. Meanwhile, policies like rent control have reduced rental supply, while development charges and approval delays continue driving up costs. After 20 years of housing strategies, the average home price has tripled. Healthcare reforms have produced even worse outcomes for patients. The province spent billions reorganizing health units, creating new agencies, and launching digital initiatives. Yet emergency room wait times have doubled, and 2.3 million more Ontarians lost access to family doctors. The latest restructuring promises to improve efficiency, but patients are dying while politicians rearrange organizational charts. Transit projects showcase government incompetence on a massive scale. The Eglinton Crosstown LRT, originally scheduled to open in 2020, is now delayed until at least 2025 and has blown through its $5.3 billion budget. The Ontario Line subway project, announced with great fanfare in 2019, won't see a single train until 2030 at the earliest. Meanwhile, commuters continue suffering through daily gridlock that costs the economy billions annually. Environmental policies add insult to injury by imposing costs without delivering results. Ontario's cap-and-trade system was scrapped, then replaced with a federal carbon tax that raises costs for families, while emissions continue rising. Green energy initiatives have driven up electricity rates by 300% since 2003, yet the province still relies heavily on natural gas and imports electricity from coal-burning plants in other jurisdictions. The pattern is consistent across every policy area. Politicians announce ambitious plans, spend billions on consultants and bureaucracy, then blame previous governments when nothing improves. Voter turnout in the 2022 provincial election hit a record low of 43%, reflecting widespread disgust with a political system that promises everything and delivers nothing. Real families pay the price for this dysfunction. When housing policy fails, young couples can't afford homes. When healthcare reforms flop, patients suffer. When transit projects collapse, workers waste years of their lives in traffic. The cumulative effect of all these problems is fundamentally changing who can afford to live in Ontario. The new Ontario reality: who stays and who goes. After decades of policy failures and mounting crises, Ontario is transforming into something completely different from the province that once welcomed middle-class families from around the world. Today's Ontario is increasingly a place where only two groups can survive: the wealthy who bought property before prices exploded, and those too poor or trapped to leave. The new reality is starkly divided. On one side, you have homeowners who bought before 2015 and now sit on million-dollar properties they could never afford today. These folks have seen their net worth skyrocket through no effort of their own, creating a class of accidental millionaires. On the other side, renters and young families face an impossible choice: spend 60% of their income on housing or leave Ontario entirely. The middle class is vanishing before our eyes. Statistics Canada data shows that middle-income families are fleeing Ontario for the Maritime provinces and Prairie provinces at unprecedented rates. A teacher and nurse couple earning $140,000 combined can buy a beautiful home in Halifax for $400,000, while the same house in Burlington costs $1.2 million. The math isn't even close. Immigration is masking the domestic exodus. While Ontario's overall population continues growing thanks to international migration, the province suffered a net loss of 61,000 residents to other provinces in 2023. Essentially, educated Canadians are leaving while newcomers arrive to fill service jobs that existing residents can no longer afford to take. Economic inequality in Ontario has reached levels not seen since the Great Depression. The wealthiest 10% of households now control over 70% of the province's total wealth, while the bottom 50% own less than 5%. This isn't just about income anymore. It's about fundamental access to housing, healthcare, and opportunity. Consider two families living just blocks apart in Mississauga. The Garcias bought their home in 2010 for $350,000. Today it's worth $1.1 million, giving them wealth and security they never expected. Meanwhile, the Patels, who moved to Ontario in 2020, pay $2,800 monthly rent for a basement apartment while saving for a down payment on a home they'll likely never afford. Ontario is becoming a province of haves and have-nots, with very little in between. The question isn't whether this trend will continue. The question is whether Ontario can maintain its economic dominance when it's pricing out the middle class that built its prosperity.